Welcome to Free Range Flock. We were once the latchkey kids who came home to an empty house after school. We were feral, resilient, cynical, and innovative. Older than Google. Our teenage faces were never posted on social media. The internet was just an idea in our youth. Now we are older, wiser, and thriving. Our independent ways will continue to serve us. We plan to keep defying the odds, and we will carve our own path with grace, with humor, with joy, our way. We've been through some stuff. We will continue to keep pushing, and we are not going anywhere. The former latchkey kids are now the free range flock.
So, Sass, have you ever found yourself ignoring those little messages about how things are going?
You mean like the little warning lights in your car?
Yeah, but not just your car, but like for you. What are you ignoring?
Oh, yeah. Well, sometimes it's the time for service lights, and other times it's like check engine. You don't want those ones. But what you really don't want to see is all the lights.
Oh, God, that's scary.
All the lights. So, yeah, definitely. I think that most of the time mine are like the little time for service lights. Mm-hmm. But periodically it's the, oh God, all the lights are on. What the hell's going on in my life?
It could be just like, let me just get to the exit. Let me just, I know you're going off. Just give me like another 30 seconds.
Please don't abandon me on the road.
Ooh, yes. I found myself recently really kind of questioning I like to multitask. And I think being a mom and working multiple jobs, and it's something that I've almost kind of prided myself in the past as my superpower of in my 20s and 30s and 40s, I can get a lot done at one time. And because I wanted to show the world how productive I could be. Look at me and look at all the things I can get done. I've got a kid and a job at the same time without missing a beat. How awesome am I? Well,
you are awesome.
I do feel awesome. And some days I can still kind of like do a couple of things at the same time. But nowadays it doesn't feel as wonderful or as genuine as it used to be. This approach was just not serving me. I do like getting tasks done on my to-do list. I do have a daily to-do list. It's important. But I want my efforts to really represent the best of me. So I'm trying to be everything to everybody. Really can backfire.
Oh yeah, definitely.
On so many ways.
You can't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible to be everything to everyone.
Mm-hmm. And what happened was, if something has to be sacrificed, it was my self-care.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I'm not going to take care of myself, but I'm going to make sure my son's got this, and I make sure at work they've got this. So, but I don't like the idea, and I think that's what got me. I don't like the idea that my loved ones felt like they were a task. Like the things I was doing for them was a task and not an act of love.
Right.
Like I was running around getting stuff ready, for my son, and like, I'm doing this, and I put this special thing on, and it's like, and I got him on the bus, like, that felt like panic and chaotic, and didn't feel like I was doing it out of love. I think it wasn't coming across the way I wanted, so it really made me really think. It's also made my employers think that they can continue to ask me to do more and more because I was a person who was able to get a lot done. And I'm like, I literally taught them how to overuse me.
Yes. And I agree with that 100%. And I feel like it's not just you, though.
Yeah.
Because that is corporate culture at this point, whether it's in the educational world, whether it's in the nonprofit world, whether it's in the corporate world. That is the way our society works now. And it's beaten us up.
Yeah.
Like as employees, as people who are living in that culture, it is killing us.
Yeah. And it's not working.
No.
It's not working.
No.
Instead, I want to focus on that, I am worthy of respect and love. And I can get a lot done in a short period of time, but I want to rethink about how I'm valuing multitasking and my focus being much more intentional. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think that multitasking to a certain point is just part of life, especially as caregivers. I'm not going to frame this as gendered, but if you're a caregiver of anyone, you have to multitask because it's just part of being a caregiver, because you're, answering questions and feeding and, taking care of the house and all the things, plus your job usually. So I don't want to demonize multitasking.
Right.
But at the same time, we cannot be expected as employees, especially, to wear so many hats and have our bosses expect us to do a good job.
Right.
Because we're not going to.
Right.
We can't do it all well.
That's a crisis moment. I mean, if you're having to do that, you're not doing your best work.
Exactly.
And so if they're looking at that going, oh, we can keep running at that same kind of level, we can't. We can't.
Exactly. And going back to what you said a moment ago about teaching them that. Yeah. When you are heroic, when you do those heroic efforts, and I am the worst about this. I am guilty of doing this. Oh, believe me, I am totally the black kettle here, because I'm constantly doing this at work because it's expected. People come to me when they're in crisis and they say, I need help, and I am a helper, and I can't help but help. I mean, it's just my personality, but it is terrible for me, and it is terrible for our culture, and we have to stop doing it.
So that's why we want to focus today's episode on talking about the importance of being intentional with our time and paying attention to messages that we're receiving about how well things are going. I really feel like this topic is a bit overdue for both of us. We got a lot of passion on this. So that's our little warning to you guys. We have a lot of passion on this because it's something that we both are kind of gripping with, something that we're both dealing with here at this time. And I'm going to be honest, I feel like I'm afraid that I have been missing a lot of important messages around me. Messages that are saying slow down, enjoy more, do less. How are you feeling, Sass?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, yes. Big capital letters, yes. So many things keep pointing me to a similar direction as what you're describing. Fatigue, brain fog, difficulty enjoying things that are supposed to be fun. All of these things, by the way, are also signs of burnout and depression. So in today's world, I think that a majority of folk in the workforce are feeling these things. They're constantly feeling overtasked. They get lost easily. I mean, and when I mean that in their thoughts, in their to-dos, the things that they're doing on a daily basis, whether that's personal life or their day jobs. And I feel like people are having a harder and harder time distinguishing, am I okay or am I not okay?
Right.
Those warning lights that I was joking about earlier with the car, I really wish we had them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you don't know what you're feeling until you're so deep into it. And then it becomes a crisis.
Yeah. It's not just one area of your life. It could be your home, it could be work, or it could be happening in multiple areas. I feel like now that I'm in my 50s, I'm trying to be much more reflective about my choices. And I sense that a lot of free rangers are out there feeling the same way that we're feeling right now. So I thought it might be helpful to, even though our life experiences are different, sharing some examples, not going to be too personal, but just enough that can help you understand like all the different ways this manifests. So, Sara, do you want to share a bit about how you're seeing this right now and how it's making you question being intentional?
I've been dreading doing things, which isn't good. None of us need to dread parts of your life, and even things I enjoy. It's kind of like once I get there and I start doing the thing, I usually enjoy the thing.
Yeah.
But it's just having the motivation to actually get out the door and do something that isn't absolutely necessary, like eating or sleeping.
Right.
So it's like, I know that's not healthy. I mean, and you and I have had multiple conversations about, life at the moment, and it's just it is what it is. It's nothing that I can change in this moment, but I'm trying to get better about it. But what I find myself doing is I'm doing escapism. So it's like I want to either sleep or I want to escape into fiction. So it's TV or reading or it's just complete escapism where I don't have to look and deal with reality.
No.
Which is really sad because I like doing things. I like going to concerts. I like going to my ukulele club. I enjoy doing my band stuff. But because there are so many things that we're all being tasked with and feeling overwhelmed with, and it's happening to me on a more frequent basis. And so it's like my brain is starting to shut down. And I know you've experienced something similar.
Oh, definitely. My example's a little different. But I think it was reflecting the fact that I have been ignoring a warning light. So I'm a very active person. I've actually this year have had to learn to be a little less active in that I went to the doctor to help me kind of get really healthy, and she started to question how often I was working out, and that's when I learned that I couldn't run anymore just because of my knees. But so now my dog is my trainer, and we walk 3 to 5 miles every day. So like before, when I sit down to work at home around 8:15, I've already walked almost 4 miles, either on the treadmill or outside. And if you are someone who is active, that you know that if you start putting a lot of mileage on your shoes, you're supposed to change your shoes out every like 3 to 4 months. And I will confess that I realized that I have been, the last time I bought a pair of walking shoes was the beginning of last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so what was happening was there's a certain, I'm sure this happens to other people as well. There's a certain point in my shoe that tends to wear out and sends me a signal. And it's like it's a certain area above my toes on my left side. And when I start feeling that, I'm like, oh, let me go order some more shoes. I have been ignoring it. Just like I'll put it off, or like I'll take off my shoes and forget. And so I've been putting this off for a while, not just a little bit, but for a while. And now what has happened is now it's not just a warning. It's all my lights are on. All the lights are on in my car, and I'm literally in pain. And I sent poor Sass a picture of my toes. I'm like, look at my toes. That my literally turning blue because they were hurt. And I'm laying in bed. It's waking me up at night. I'm laying in bed, and I'm like, why not let this happen? The warning light was on. I'm doing this for my self-care. My self-care is to walk and be active, and I literally let it hurt me.
Yeah.
And I immediately got up the next morning and ordered some shoes. I'm like,
good for
I gotta
you.
wear. And right now I can't even wear shoes because my feet hurt so much. So I ignored the lights. I'm a grown-ass woman, and I ignored the lights. So now I know that I have to be much more intentional. If this is self-care, I need to like really make it self-care.
Well, and I think it's hard sometimes because, to your point, when you're in the moment and you're busy and the warning light comes on, you're thinking, oh, I can get to the next exit.
Yeah.
You know, I can put this off a little while. You know, it'll be all right. But if you keep ignoring it, you end up with sore toes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's a terrible analogy with warning lights, but, you know.
But no, it works. I think it works. So just a question for you, Sass. How are you being honest with yourself about what makes you happy? So how are you doing that? It doesn't mean that you figured it out. I mean, maybe you haven't figured it out.
No, I think it's a great question, and that changes. I mean, you and I have talked about happiness, you know, in the past, and I think that, you know, sometimes one thing makes you happy, and then another time another thing makes you happy. So I have lots of things that make me happy in my life. I'm very grateful for that. But you do periodically have to kind of, it's like almost like you're doing an audit and you're going, does this thing still bring me joy? It's like, it's almost like you need to Marie Kondo yourself instead of your closet and go, does this thing bring me joy? Does this activity bring me joy? Does this thing that I do with my life, is it good for me?
Right.
And, you know, sometimes the answer is no.
Right.
And that's when you need to do that, you know, all right, how do we change this? How do we use that as that crisis point to then make the shift that you need to make? Yeah,
and I think I'm doing the same thing in that I'm starting to ask, like, I'm spending a lot of time doing this. Am I getting out of it what I need to get out of it? And starting like taking stuff away.
Exactly.
Or just do it less. Like if I have to do it, do I have to do it to the extreme that I was doing? So, just being really honest about what makes you happy. You got to be honest.
You definitely do. And sometimes it's hard to be honest because it might hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah.
Or, you may have made a commitment to do something, but it's become more of a chore because more responsibility has been dumped upon you because of that activity. And it's okay to reevaluate where you are with whatever it is that you're doing with your life.
Right.
And say, you know what, that was great, but I'm done with that. And
Right.
I need to step away.
Right. My son plays a sport. I won't mention what it is. And when he first did it, he loved it. He loved it. And now it's just like I have to beg him to go to class. And this sport is so expensive. And so when I have to convince him to go, and then I start harping on him like, I spend a lot of money. I hear myself going, why am I saying this? And I'm like, you know what? We need to take a break. If he's at the point that he doesn't want to go anymore, because when he first started, he was like, I love it. I can't wait to go. He wore the uniform all the time and played with the gear. He's not at that point anymore. And I'm like, you know what? We have to be honest with ourselves that this is not making us happy. And the reality is that we can always come back. It's not going away. We can just say, let's take a year or two off, and then you can come back and maybe your love will renew.
Exactly.
So
sometimes it really is just about, what is working in this moment and, being realistic about it.
But one of the things about intentionality is that not only are we being honest with ourselves, but through our actions, we're teaching others about how to treat yourself, how to treat you.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So how are you doing that now? How do you think you're doing that? Or what's a way that you want to do that, how to teach others? It's
a great question. So I think that one of the things that I'm working on currently to help with that, so we're not training people poorly, is to set boundaries.
Right.
Because it's so important to let people know I'm not crossing this line. I mean, sometimes you need to mediate that.
Right.
It's you all can't always be that hard about it. But you have to let people know what you're willing and not willing to do. And then when you set those boundaries, you hold to it.
Right.
So if that boundary gets broken, then there are consequences for that. And you're not just saying the words, you actually have to follow through, which is hard, especially when it's work related, because sometimes you don't have that negotiation power.
Right.
But at the same time, you need to at least voice your concerns, and that's one of the things that I'm working towards is just kind of, raising my hand and letting people know what my concerns are and working with people within my team to make sure that we're all being protected and we're not being overwhelmed too much.
Right. And I love there's a coworker that does this really well, and I'm trying to do this better in that sometimes you'll have too much on your plate, and when they add one more, they'll go, okay, you have 5 things on my plate. I have time to do 3. What do you want me to prioritize? Because something here is not going to get done. You've got too much on my plate, and you only got me for 40 hours, and you're not willing to pay me overtime. What do you want me to take off? And I've never been someone to do that. I've always been the person who goes, I'm just going to multitask and just get it done. It may not be my best work, but I'll get it done. And people expect that of me. But now I'm like, I'm not going to work like that anymore. I'm going to say, okay, you've given me stuff that takes longer than the time you've given me. You're going to have to, you, my boss or my supervisor, you're going to have to choose which ones you want me to do. If you want these to be done well, then you need to put some of these on someone else's plate. Or just realize it's not going to happen. And just say, find a way to get it done is not an answer.
Exactly. And until we as employees start saying those words, things are not going to change.
Right.
And I think that I'm seeing that within my organization to a certain extent, is people are starting to be much more vocal about setting realistic goals. Because the powers that be can say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and these are our project goals, and these are, our strategic plans for the year. But if you don't have the people who are able to do it and back up that, they're just words.
Right.
And so we have to be more realistic about our expectations of our employees.
And say, hey, I know that in the past, I've managed to get these 5 things done, but I haven't done them well. And I want to be much more intentional and do things well and give it my full attention. And the way that we were operating before was in a crisis mode. And we cannot go every week in a crisis mode, because then you will not have any more employees.
Well, exactly, because you burn people out.
Yeah.
And you cannot expect people to act in a heroic manner every single day.
Right.
Because it is not fair to them, and you're not creating a good product.
Right.
No matter what no matter what you're doing, you're not doing it well. So I just think that I am seeing a lot more of that within my workplace. And I'm hoping that that's true in other workplaces.
Yeah, let's all keep that up. Let's all keep it up.
Yeah, definitely.
So what can we all do differently going forward to help us be more intentional about our life choices? So what are some things that you're considering?
So I guess to be more intentional, I'm trying to be more vocal. I'm trying to, set those boundaries that I was talking about. For me, it's also doing those audits that I was talking about periodically. Yeah. It's just it's like taking a pause and saying, okay, is this still serving me?
Right.
Is this making me happy? Is this forwarding my career? Is this, in whatever aspect of your life you're thinking about,
right.
you have to do those audits. And I can't say that I've done them when I was younger. It was not something that I did
right.
when I thought I could carry all the things on my back. And I'm realizing as I'm getting older, I can't do that. And so, just being more aware of my limitations and trying to be more clear about stating those limitations to other people and saying, I can't do this.
There are limitations, but they're also, this is what's in my ability to do. And I think that what makes it a little bit harder, makes it harder for you as opposed to me, I work in an industry where my supervisor understands the complexity of what I do. And that really helps.
Yes.
And so when that person's asking me to do something, they know the time that's involved there. But you being a graphic designer, you've got to really advocate for yourself and just, and you're constantly having to educate them about, when I do this one page takes me this amount of time. So if you're going to throw me 100 pages, do the math. This is how long it's going to take.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's something that has been historically difficult for my field of work, is because unless you're there doing it, unless you do it every day, you don't understand the impact of asking me to do a layout. They're always asking for time, so I'm going to go off on a tangent for a second. There's always that ask for time. How long is this going to take? Well, it's like buying a car.
Yeah.
I can either put it in a Word document and, make it look neat and branded, but it's a Word document.
Right.
Or I can do a magazine style layout, which is going to take me 3 times as long, but it's going to look a lot nicer for your client. So
Right.
it really is you need to give me some parameters around how long is this going to take? Well, what do you want me to do?
Right.
And that has been an educational process as long as I've been doing this. I mean, that's a constant wall I have to push up against because it's hard because people don't understand.
Right.
Now we're adding in another layer of complexity with what I do, which is accessibility, which is beautiful because we're trying to make things more accessible for people. But that adds yet another probably 25% time to everything I touch.
Right.
Because I then now have to make sure I'm reviewing it to make sure that it's accessible.
Right.
So it's a constant education process, I think. And I think that being more vocal about it is about all we can do, making sure that you're raising your hand.
Right.
And saying, yeah, I can do this for you. But please make sure that you're including this much into your budget and in your timeline to make sure that we're able to cover it.
Right. And listening to you talk, it made me think that, this whole podcast series is about how the free rangers, the Gen X, we are in midlife differently and we're thinking about being more authentic. But let's be real. No generation has figured this out.
Right.
My parents messed this up. My grandparents messed this up. I teach a class to college freshmen. They're messing it up. No one knows how to set their time, their priorities, and be intentional. No one's doing this well.
It's hard.
Now is the time. Now and let's let Gen X help you with this. Okay, let the Free Rangers be an example of this. This is not sustainable. And I'm constantly, trying to help my 18-year-old students. I love them, but they'll just look at me and I'm like, at this time, you should be doing this on your project. And they're like, eh? I'm like, I haven't thought about it yet. I haven't read that description yet. I'm like, I'm going to teach you. We're going to go through the steps, and I'm going to teach you how to be intentional to give this assignment the level of attention it needs. Now's the time to learn that. And what I need to do is go another step and say, hey, generations, we're not getting. You're going to race and try to get this done and not do your best work, and you're going to get the end and be so frustrated with yourself. Now is the time. 2023, 2024, now is the time that we all need to stop and be much more intentional. So this message is not just for the free rangers, but everyone out there. Now is the time we have to use our time differently, because everyone before us messed this up. Like my parents just burned themselves out. They got to retirement and were burned out. Yep. My grandparents burned out, and then they didn't want to work, so they stayed in their chairs and got unhealthy. No one has modeled this well. Now is the time that we do this. It's a big ask. It's a big ask. I get it. But we're capable of doing this, because if we all collectively say, we're going to use our time wisely and look after ourselves and say, I cannot do all this in the time, and I'm going to be much more intentional about doing my best work, we can change things.
I think that it kind of almost goes back to resistance. It's kind of like rest is resistance.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
I love that phrase too. And it's also like working with intention is also resistance. Setting those boundaries within your life, whether it's on the personal level or on the professional level, that is resistance. That is how we make change.
Right.
And we have to stick to our guns.
Right. And I'm 54. I know my son is watching me, and I'm like, when I deliberately slowed my life down, I thought, I'm going to make sure that when he leaves the nest at 18, or whatever age he is when he leaves the nest, oh my God, let me think about that he knows that life is not about working yourself to death.
Yes.
I will, if he learns anything from me, he needs to learn how to do his laundry and clean the house and whatever, and be a good person. He's going to learn that valuing your life and your time is important. And if you start letting people make you multitask and do things that it's not a sustainable pace, they're going to ask you to continue that. That's not just if you can do it here, you can do it every day. No. I want to make sure that I think he's now in the alpha generation. I think that's what's officially called. So it's after the Gen Z. I know they just went right back to the start of the alphabet. They just went right to the end. I want to make sure that the alphas, they get this right. And this is the legacy we need to leave. Like, let's do this right.
I agree.
So today we talked about the importance of being intentional about how you're using your time and making sure that how you're using that time represents who you truly are and value. We talked a lot about how overworking is not an intentional way of working, and it's not sustainable, and these things can lead to depression and burnout.
Yes.
And so we will do our best to put some resources in there so that if you are listening to this and hearing yourself and go, this is me, we'll try to give you some starting points for that. The key thing is awareness is key. That's the first step. And then if you need help, trusted friend, seasoned professional, find what you need to do that. So we'll definitely put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Any big takeaways today, Sarah? I mean, we've had a lot of passion around this, so we had to really watch ourselves because we're going through this. We're trying to lead things differently, do things differently, and sometimes, especially when it comes to an employer, it takes a lot of advocating and a lot of work.
Yeah, and I think that intentionality is important. And for myself, it's just an unhealthy way of doing things. And it's not just them. I am not picking on my employer by any means, because I do think that they try. But it's just the world. And especially Western culture tends to put huge emphasis on work as being the focus of your life.
Right.
And we have to shift that mindset.
Right.
And being intentional and setting boundaries and all of those things are ways that we can do that, and we can help influence change wherever we are.
Right. And talking about it more.
Yes.
I think that we're all kind of in our own hamster wheel going, I hope someone else is out there having fun because I'm right now running like a ragged person. So we need to be talking about it more and then advocating for ourselves more and saying, okay, what you have on my plate is not sustainable for this week. You're paying me for 40 hours. You've easily given me 60 hours worth of work. So you need to find 20 hours to take off my plate because it's not going to be done well.
And that's the hard part right now. I mean, especially if you're, a person, and I'm speaking from experience, I'm a pleaser. And so I want to try to make everyone happy and make sure everyone has what they need.
Right.
But we have to be realistic about what we can actually accomplish in our days.
Right.
And so we have to advocate and we have to be intentional about that.
And, I'm in the act of leaving academia, and academia is kind of logging off. It's just like, right, you're surrendering. What are you doing? So like I would go home, make dinner, get my son to bed, and then log back on and kept going because I knew I didn't get my stuff done. And I would send emails out to my colleagues, and dang it, if they didn't come right back with responses. And I'm like, and then I was like, well, what are you doing up? And they're like, well, what are you doing up? And I'm like, we're all still up, just continuing, just like, well, we have to get this done. And if we're all doing that, that means we're trying to do too much. We're all trying to do too much. And either an employer has to hire more people or we have to shift our mindset. If your people are leaving the job and they're going home and still clocking more time that you're not even paying them for.
Exactly.
You're not a sustainable practice.
So I'm sure you've heard the term quiet quitting.
Yeah. And actually this is a term now, but we actually started it, the Gen Xers started it in the 80s when, we got out of college and then boom, we went right to a recession, like, dang. So there was some of that happened during that time.
But I think it's at least the terminology, the way I understand it for today is, people are leaving at 5 o'clock. It's like if your work hours are from 9 to 5, say, that at 5 o'clock you're out the door.
Right.
There is not logging on later. Right. There is not checking email after you go home. They're paying you for X amount of hours, and that's the amount of hours. Josephus talks about that.
Wow.
If you're giving all of this beautiful time to your employer, but you're not willing to give the same amount of time to yourself, there is something wrong in the balance of things.
Yes.
And I think younger people are starting to recognize that. And I think since the pandemic, people are starting to prioritize what's important in their lives. And that kind of resistance is important that we all do it. So be intentional and go home at 5 o'clock or whatever your quitting time is.
So the episode that she's referencing is the Taking Risk episode with Josephus Thompson III. And it's funny that the episodes that we've recorded so far, we've left changed in some way. It's like one of the two of us needed to hear that message. And when he was here and talked about how you're willing to give your employer 40 hours a week, but you won't give yourself one. What the heck is that? That sat on my heart heavy for a long time. And I feel like a lot of my actions and intentionality now is just reflecting like, yes, I'm a priority. My employer's a priority, but so am I. And so this isn't balancing out, and I'm working on that and being more intentional. So I feel like we're continuing to learn the lessons from Josephus.
Oh, yes. Well, I think that you and I both have talked about this in the past, is that people tend to get in your path.
For a reason.
For a reason. Whether that's an actual person that you sit and talk to or whether it's a book or a movie or whatever, things get in your path for a reason. And the people we've had on have really been very impactful, the conversations that we've had.
And I just hope with all my might that if you're listening, that you either needed to hear this or it's resonating with you in some way, that you're also being moved by that and it's making you reflective and think differently about things.
Yeah, definitely. So if you haven't joined us on our social platforms, we would love to have you friend us or, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. We are also now on YouTube. So I keep forgetting to mention that, but we are on YouTube. So find us there as well. And let us know, how are you being intentional in your life? How is that affecting your life? How is that influencing change? Because we would love to hear it. And thanks for listening, y'all. Thank you for joining us for Free Range Flock. Our goal is to inspire and celebrate who we are, the Generation X kids who grew up and decided to do things their way, with grace, humor, and joy. This has been a production of Sassy Am. If you want to learn more about our podcast, follow our blog, share your positive insights about being a free ranger, or to suggest topics or guests for future episodes, please visit our website at sassyam.com. That's SASSAYAM.com. Keep pushing.